1 drop of blood, 200 tests, no needles, no pain. That was the promise that captivated Silicon Valley. The problem? The machine didn't work, patients got false diagnoses, and investors threw $700 million at it anyway. This is the story of how a 19-year-old Stanford dropout convinced the world she'd cracked the code on blood testing, and how it all came crashing down. December 2003. A 19-year-old stares at herself in the mirror, practicing her pitch like she's about to audition for the role of tech genius in the movie of her own life. We're going to revolutionize healthcare. We're going to revolutionize healthcare.
We are going to revolutionize healthcare.
Girl, that's not your real voice. Shut up, mirror. You don't understand innovation? Elizabeth Holmes had just dropped out of Stanford, and she'd got a vision that was about to change everything. Or so she thought. She wasn't always the black turtleneck-wearing, deep-voiced figure we'd later see on magazine covers. That was all carefully constructed, like a tech startup version of Batman. But instead of fighting crime, she was fighting, well, actually nothing. As a kid, she worshipped Thomas Edison. Mommy, I want to be just like Edison. That's nice, dear. You know he electrocuted elephants, right? What? Never mind. In college, she studied chemical engineering and pitched her professor on a drug delivery patch. He shot it down faster than a paper airplane in a hurricane. This idea makes no scientific sense. But what if I told you it was revolutionary? Still no.
What if I made my voice deeper?
Please leave my office. So she did what any ambitious teenager would do. She dropped out and decided to build the future herself. Because clearly, if you can't pass Chemistry 101, the logical next step is to revolutionize all of medicine. Holmes called her company Theranos, mixing therapy and diagnosis. The pitch was irresistible. Imagine testing for cancer, diabetes, STDs, and dozens of other conditions with just a tiny prick of your finger. No more getting stabbed with needles. No more vials of blood. No more waiting days for results. This was Silicon Valley catnip, a young genius with a world-changing idea. But here's the thing. She never explained how it would actually work. We are amazed by your pitch. Could you tell us further regarding how the machine works?
Yeah, science.
But what kind of science?
Advanced science.
Can you be more specific?
Revolutionary, advanced science. Have a great day.
In Silicon Valley, explaining how things work is apparently optional. The money started flowing like water from a broken fire hydrant, and Holmes began assembling a board that looked less like a startup and more like a shadow government preparing for the zombie apocalypse. Former Secretaries of State George Shultz and Henry Kissinger. 4-star generals like James Mattis. These weren't tech guys. They were power brokers who probably couldn't tell the difference between a USB port and a cup holder. They didn't understand the science, but they understood influence. And Holmes? She spoke their language fluently. Not with data or proof, but with grand visions of the future and really, really good PowerPoint slides. This isn't just innovation, she'd tell them, while gesturing dramatically at charts that meant absolutely nothing. This is the next chapter of human health. By 2013, the myth was complete. Forbes crowned her the world's youngest self-made female billionaire, which was like crowning someone world's best unicorn trainer. Technically impressive, but based on something that doesn't exist. She graced magazine covers, gave TED Talks, and name-dropped her innovation without a trace of irony. Media mogul Rupert Murdoch invested. So did the Walton family and Oracle's Larry Ellison. Theranos raised over $700 million. On paper, it was worth $9 billion. Walgreens and Safeway were already planning to put Theranos machines in their stores, right next to the lottery tickets and energy drinks. And the company hadn't even launched to the public yet. It's like selling tickets to a movie that hasn't been filmed, starring actors who don't exist, based on a script written in crayon. Holmes had pulled off something remarkable. She'd sold the world on a dream before anyone had to see if it actually worked. Which, spoiler alert, it didn't. Step inside Theranos headquarters, and you'd see everything you'd expect from a hot Silicon Valley startup. Glass walls, biometric scanners, that sleek minimalist vibe that screamed, "We're changing the world," while quietly whispering, "We have no idea what we're doing." But behind all those locked doors and security badges sat the company's crown jewel, a machine they called the Edison. This box was supposed to be the holy grail of medical testing. Over 200 different blood tests from a single drop of blood. Except it didn't work, not even close. The Edison could barely handle a dozen tests on a good day. Sometimes, just one. And even then, the results were wildly unreliable. One engineer later joked that the most predictable thing about the machine was how unpredictably it would fail. But Theranos had painted themselves into a corner. The world already believed. Investors were writing checks bigger than most people's mortgages. Walgreens was planning a nationwide rollout. So they did what any desperate company would do. They faked it. When investors came for demos, it was pure theater. The Edison would be polished to perfection, like a prop in a very expensive play. Staff rehearsed their movements like actors. The results they handed over? They weren't from the machine everyone just watched. They were from conventional lab equipment hidden in the back, running tests the old-fashioned way. Real blood, fake demo. Everyone smiled and shook hands like they'd just witnessed a miracle instead of an elaborate magic trick. Meanwhile, the engineers were losing their minds. They'd spend months redesigning parts of the machine, only to watch their work get quietly shelved like rejected homework. People started whispering in stairwells, paranoid about being overheard. One former employee said it felt like working in North Korea, but with better snacks. The deception went deeper than just the technology. Theranos actually ran 2 separate labs. The official one was clean and audit-ready, perfect for fooling regulators. The real one was where the chaos lived. Bad data, failed tests, numbers that got massaged until they looked acceptable. When results came back wrong, which happened constantly, they'd just rerun the tests until they got something that seemed right. Lab directors who tried to speak up were told they weren't being team players, which translates to, you're about to get fired for having a conscience. One seasoned pathologist tried to sound the alarm about safety issues. He was pushed out. Weeks later, he died by suicide. His death haunts this story, a human cost that got buried under all the press coverage and investor excitement. And the patients? They were getting results that made no sense. A woman was told twice that she was HIV positive. False alarms that turned her life upside down. Another got a cancer scare that was completely bogus. Phantom pregnancies, fake blood infections, hormone readings that were totally off. Inside Theranos, these were called anomalies. Outside, they were people's lives getting derailed. When staff brought up these problems, they were told that mistakes were just a part of moving fast and breaking things. Or worse, that they weren't authorized to ask questions. The silence wasn't accidental. Every floor had security checkpoints. Conversations might be monitored. New hires got MD as thicker than medical textbooks. Ask the wrong question, and you'd be told you didn't fit the culture. Departments couldn't talk to each other by design. Engineers weren't allowed to speak with lab staff. Lab staff couldn't talk to sales. Nobody had the full picture except Elizabeth Holmes. And standing right behind her was Sunny Balwani. Sunny was the company's COO and Holmes's secret boyfriend, though nobody at the company knew about their relationship. He had zero background in medicine or diagnostics, but he made up for it with pure intimidation. Balwani ruled through fear, screaming in meetings and threatening lawsuits. His favorite line was, "If you don't believe in this company, you should leave." A lot of people did, quietly and quickly, sometimes after just a few days. The machine was failing, the labs were lying, and the team was falling apart. But the public, still completely enchanted. Holmes was still being called a visionary. Walgreens was still preparing their nationwide launch. Every lie eventually meets its truth. For Theranos, that reckoning came from the inside. It started with whispered phone calls between former employees, people who'd left the company but couldn't shake what they'd seen. Then 2 names emerged that would blow everything wide open, Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung. Both were young idealists who joined Theranos to change the world. Both saw enough to realize the dream was built on lies. Chung noticed that test results were all over the place, the kind of wild inconsistencies that would get any legitimate lab shut down. She raised concerns. Her emails got ignored. Her badge access got revoked. She left quietly. Schultz was the grandson of George Shultz, the former Secretary of State who sat on Theranos' board. Tyler saw fake demos, manipulated data, and a company obsessed with secrecy over science. He tried to warn his grandfather. "Grandpa, Theranos is lying about everything." "Tyler, dear boy, Elizabeth is a visionary. The machine doesn't work. Sometimes visions take time to materialize. People are getting wrong medical results. Innovation is messy, Tyler. Grandpa, they are committing fraud. Have you considered that maybe you're just not understanding the bigger picture? When he spoke up externally, Theranos went nuclear. The company launched a full intimidation campaign. Legal threats, surveillance, private investigators following whistleblowers around. They watched homes, tapped phones, and threatened Tyler with lawsuits that would have bankrupted him, all before his 25th birthday. But the truth was already out there in the hands of Wall Street Journal reporter John Carreyrou. Carreyrou started digging. He met sources in parking garages and diners like some kind of medical Watergate. He verified documents, made calls nobody wanted to return. When Holmes and Balwani caught wind of the investigation, they panicked. They tried everything to kill the story before it ran. Lawyers, threats, legal notices to employees they suspected of talking. But Carreyrou kept pushing. In October 2015, the Wall Street Journal published the exposé that shattered the illusion. The piece laid it all out. Theranos wasn't using its own technology for most tests. The Edison couldn't deliver on its promises. Results were dangerously inaccurate. Patient safety was at risk. The myth of Elizabeth Holmes was officially dead. Holmes went into full damage control. She denied everything, called the article false, claimed Carreyrou was a misogynist with an agenda. She went on CNBC and said,
This is what happens when you work to change things. First, they think you're crazy. Then they fight you. Then you change the world.
But behind the scenes, panic was spreading fast. Walgreens froze their partnership and launched an internal investigation. Safeway, which had spent over $350 million preparing to integrate Theranos testing, pulled out completely. Doctors stopped trusting the results. Patients came forward with horror stories about false diagnoses that had upended their lives. Then the regulators showed up. In 2016, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services conducted an inspection that revealed a complete disaster. Theranos had failed to meet basic lab standards. Results were unreliable across the board. Quality control was practically non-existent. The punishment was swift and brutal. Theranos was banned from operating blood testing labs. Holmes was stripped of her license to run a lab for 2 years. The company was ordered to void 2 years of blood test results, basically admitting that thousands of medical decisions had been made using garbage data. Investors were furious, doctors were livid, patients felt betrayed. And Holmes? She doubled down, insisting the technology still worked and promising they'd fix everything. But the house was already burning down. By 2018, Elizabeth Holmes no longer controlled her own story. The magazine covers were gone, the TED Talks were over, and in their place came something much colder. Formal charges from the SEC. Holmes and Balwani were accused of massive fraud, deliberately misleading investors while patients received false test results. All those years of promises and billion-dollar valuations were now being called what they really were: lies. Holmes cut a deal with the SEC. She didn't admit guilt, but agreed to step down, pay a $500,000 fine, and accept a 10-year ban from running any public company. For a moment, it looked like she might escape the worst of it. Then the Department of Justice filed criminal charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, crimes that carried up to 20 years in prison each. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about freedom. The trial was delayed by the pandemic, then by Holmes's pregnancy. When it finally began in late 2021, it felt like Silicon Valley itself was on trial. Its hype, its blind faith in charismatic founders, its willingness to believe in magic. The prosecution laid out years of deception. Former employees testified about being silenced. Investors described pitches that were pure fiction. Lab reports showed evidence of editing, altering, sometimes outright forgery. Then Holmes took the stand, something her lawyers probably wished she hadn't done. For 7 days, she tried to rewrite the narrative. She said she believed in the mission, never meant to mislead anyone. But then she made it personal, accusing Sunny Balwani of abuse and control.
Sunny controlled every aspect of my life.
Including your decision to defraud investors?
Well, yes.
Including your fake deep voice? That wasn't...
I mean, that was all natural.
Ma'am, we have recordings. The courtroom was riveted. Some saw courage, others saw desperation. In January 2022, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty on 4 counts of defrauding investors. She was acquitted on charges related to patient harm, but the damage was done. Balwani's trial followed. Unlike Holmes, he didn't testify. The evidence spoke for itself. Emails, investor presentations, altered documents. He was found guilty on all 12 counts and sentenced to nearly 13 years in prison. Holmes got 11. By then, Theranos was long dead. The company dissolved in 2018. Its labs shuttered, its machines scrapped. Walgreens quietly exited. Investors lost hundreds of millions. Patients were left with confusion and, in some cases, trauma. Elizabeth Holmes promised to revolutionize medicine with a single drop of blood. What she actually delivered was broken trust, false hope, and one of the biggest scandals in Silicon Valley history. The machines are silent now, but the story lives on, not as a tale of innovation, but as a warning about what happens when belief replaces proof, when charisma substitutes for competence, and when one drop of blood becomes one lie too many. Holmes didn't start out trying to con the world. She believed her own hype. And for a while, so did everyone else. But in the end, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and Theranos never had any.